Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Now, you see the title, we're going to talk about Dwane Casey in this podcast, but before we get into it, we mentioned it this summer that we've started our second channel, Courtside Connect, where we're going to talk about all things NBA basketball, and we said that in the summer. We made a few videos, and we realized that there's a few more hurdles that we had to overcome in order to make that content and do that on a consistent basis and bring the best content for you guys. So we waited until now. We finally overcame those hurdles, overcame those time commitments, all those issues, and we started up the channel. We've dropped a few videos on there already now in the past few days, so definitely recommend you guys checking that out. It's linked in our channel homepage right now. Courtside Connect, that's the name. Definitely check out those videos. We're trying to bring as much content to you guys, and we're going to branch out to all NBA content. We'd love your feedback. We'd love to hear what things we can improve on. Make it the best for you, as you guys are obviously the people we cater to. So definitely check that out. But anyways, we're talking about Dwane Casey now, and tomorrow night the Toronto Raptors face off against the Detroit Pistons, and that means the return of former Toronto Raptors head coach Dwane Casey. Now, I know Dwane Casey has kind of a mixed feelings amongst the fan base, reading through Twitter, Reddit, anywhere you can see people giving opinions about the Raptors. You hear a wide spectrum of opinions on Dwane Casey, and however you feel about the guy, there is no doubt that he is the most accomplished coach in Toronto Raptors history, and arguably the best. Now, I know there's a lot of hype behind Nick Nurse right now, which deservedly so. He started off so phenomenally for this team, but he can't be in the conversation right now as he's only coached 14 games. He can't be argued amongst other Raptors coaching legends who's coached way more games than Nick, so we're excluding him from this discussion. And I think it's hard to say that Dwane Casey isn't the best coach in franchise history. He's the longest tenured coach. He coached the team for 7 years. He won 558 games for the team, losing just 320. And looking at that stat right now, that's a 573% winning percentage. That is absolutely phenomenal when you look at the team that Dwane Casey inherited. The team that he was brought in to coach was just coming off 2 straight seasons of being the worst defense in the NBA. They were led by a 21-year-old DeMar DeRozan in his second year. He was probably their best player. Primo pasta and sauce legend Andrea Bargnani, who really couldn't do anything on the defensive end at that point. Decent scorer, but as much as I love Andrea Bargnani, I grew up watching him. He was our legend. He was our guy. He really wasn't a good player to have. And Jose Calderon, who for all the things he brought to the table on offense, just completely lost it on defense. So inheriting a roster like that, He didn't have the greatest players to coach over his first few seasons, and the fact that he could have a coaching record above 500 while coaching those abysmal rosters is a phenomenal feature. He has 21 playoff wins for the team, and Masai Ujiri, Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan get a lot of the credit for turning this Raptors franchise around. Everyone talks about Masai Ujiri's ability to draft people late in the first round and draft diamonds in the rough, make moves to fleece other teams, and Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, 2 of those guys really came into their own the past few seasons and just took a team that was a basement dweller and made them a perennial playoff contender. And those guys get a lot of credit, but no one talks about how Dwane Casey just absolutely came into this team and changed the culture. Before he was in Toronto, he was assistant coach for Rick Carlisle in Dallas when they won that NBA championship against the Big Three in Miami. Surprising everyone, Dwane Casey led that defense. He was the guy who crafted all those zones and all those freaky setups that won Dallas the chip, as they really needed some good coaching because the Miami Heat were obviously the more talented team. But Dwane Casey came up with some great schemes to shut down LeBron, and he brought in a winning vibe, a winning culture to Toronto. It was something that we really just didn't have before this era. Everyone raves about the ability to create good ball movement and the ability to draw up some fantastic plays, and that's how coaches are currently judged in the league. It's just how people look at them. You look at basketball analysts. If you're a good coach, those are the criteria you look at. But that's not what the Toronto Raptors needed at that point. If we were to bring in a guy like Nick Nurse right now onto that team, I don't think he would have done as good of a job as Dwane Casey. We needed someone that could motivate these guys and give them the confidence, instill the confidence in DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. Let them run free and show this team that we could be good. We didn't have to make many moves. Masai Ujiri only made a couple trades to really revamp this roster. There wasn't much roster turnover when Masai came in the front door, and that a lot of that is because Dwane Casey got the best out of Kyle Lowry, got the best out of a young DeMar DeRozan. There's something to be said for a coach to instill that freedom in a guy. Kyle Lowry was known to butt heads with NBA coaches. Kevin McHale, known as a great NBA basketball mind, analyst for NBA TV, he was head coaching of the Houston Rockets, and he just couldn't deal with Kyle Lowry. He couldn't deal with him. They had to trade him for a first-round pick to us, and everyone thought that Kyle Lowry was kind of a hothead, would go at coaches, and that reputation was completely dismantled once he joined the Toronto Raptors franchise. And a lot of that is because Dwane Casey knew how to deal with him. He was great at managing personalities, and for all the complaints the media, the Twitter, us at Raptors Digest had about Dwane Casey in certain aspects of his coaching ability, you never heard the players once question what he was doing. You never heard the players speak out against Dwane. They always had his back, and that's because he instilled a culture of trust. He instilled a culture that he believed in the players, so the players believed in him. And that's something that's very valuable and very underrated about his tenure with the Raptors. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast how I thought, in my opinion, Dwane Casey was the greatest coach in Raptors history. And looking at the list of coaches that you can compare him to, I don't think it's debatable. We have Sam Mitchell, who was also a coach of the year for the Raptors. He had a winning percentage of 45%, 156 for 189 as a head coach of the Raptors. He was very good. He took those Chris Bosh and Jose Calderon teams to the playoffs, and he had decent success with the team. But Toronto had a superstar in Chris Bosh at the time, and they underperformed to a certain extent as they were always at the bottom end of the playoffs when he was on the team. And at that time, one star usually gave you the opportunity to be a top 4 seed. It wasn't like the league we see it now where you need at least 2-3 superstars to even compete for a home court advantage. So that team always kind of underachieved despite their moderate success. So Sam Mitchell, I don't think can compare with Dwane Casey, especially with the fact that Casey beats him in tenure, beats him in winning percentage, beats him in playoff wins, and also took a team with 2 stars to the playoffs and did more with it. So Sam Mitchell, I think, is out of the question. Another guy is Lenny Wilkins, who only coached the team for 2 years, has a solid winning percentage again, but he really didn't. He has a great history as an NBA coach. Lenny Wilkins, one of the most winningest coaches of all time, especially because he's probably coached about 30-odd seasons, but only 2 with the Toronto Raptors and didn't do too much during that tenure. He was fine, had a 46% winning percentage and won 8 playoff games, but nothing near for the Toronto Raptors what Dwane Casey did for this team. So we have other names, Jay Triano, Brendan Malone, Butch Carter, Darrell Walker. These guys just can't compare. Dwane Casey is the best coach in franchise history. Maybe Nick Nurse will take that mantle someday, but as of right now, it's not even close. I'm giving Dwane Casey that Dwane Casey gold star, the opposite of a Damari Carroll gold star. He really came in and changed the culture for the Toronto Raptors. And I sound like a broken record, but that's something that should be greatly appreciated by the fan base, by anyone that cheers and roots for the Raptors, as we weren't going to have the success we had without a coach that was strong, that was, could draw up plays, could command the respect from the top guys. We would honestly be the Washington Wizards. The Wizards are a very similar team roster-wise to the Toronto Raptors, as they had an all-star backcourt. This is more so speaking with Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, not the team we have now, but they had an all-star backcourt, a decent bench, and some pretty solid role players. The Wizards have a similar talent-wise, but head coach Scott Brooks couldn't keep the issues with that team inside the locker room. They'd always go on some random explosion midway through the season where they all hate each other and all this stuff happens. And that's a lot to do with, we never heard any of that stuff happen with Dwane Casey. You never heard that stuff. And before Scott Brooks, it was Randy Whitman for Washington. And, they were very similar talent-wise to our team. And I think Dwane Casey was the reason that these two teams could just diverge, that this team formula worked so well with our guys and it just didn't with Washington. I know Masai did also a great job at surrounding those guys with great players, but a lot of that credit should be given to Dwane Casey. He did a great job on that front. And another great quality about him is every season he coached our team, along with our roster, he improved every year as well. I remember everyone making fun of Dwane Casey being very stagnant and old school minded, not wanting to play rookies and being very cut within his ways. He doesn't want to change. He doesn't want to evolve to the modern NBA. And if you look at how he was at the beginning of his career with the Raptors, being an ISO heavy, defensive, gritty coach that hated playing young guys, to his final season with us, running that. I know Nick Nurse gets a lot of credit for involving the offense, for creating it, but Dwane Casey made the final decision to adapt it. He made the decision to play OG Anunoby, start him at the small forward, which was a big thing, which is something you wouldn't have seen at the beginning of his tenure, as he barely played Jonas in his first 2 seasons, and he was probably our 3rd best player at the time. And he gave Siakam run, he gave all these guys opportunities, and he deserves a lot of credit for how he improved as a coach over his time with the Raptors. He, like all players, we always ask players to improve. We rarely ask that to be done from coaches, but you definitely saw the improvement in his coaching ability as he grew with the Toronto Raptors team. Anyways, I just wanted to make this video to give some credit, shine some light on Dwane Casey's career with the Toronto Raptors. And before I send it off, before we end this pod, I want to bring up a couple of my favorite Dwane Casey moments. And one of them has to go to, I believe it was last season, when he got into that argument at the end of the game with Mike Budenholzer. That was for people that were watching that game against the Atlanta Hawks, that was a complete riot. It just shows the passion that Dwane Casey coaches with. To see him standing up for our guys and going at Mike Budenholzer, that was an exciting moment as a Raptors fan. And that's something that came from Dwane Casey every game. Whether it was directed at another coach or not, that's not something that happened every game, but his passion, his energy, you'd see him always almost defending the inbounders when they were close to the bench. He was jumping around so much. He was a very animated coach, which is great to see on the sidelines. But that was one of my favorite moments. Another one was at the beginning, his very beginning, the pound the rock sentiment. You can't do a video just on Dwane Casey and not bring up the pound the rock motto. For people that don't know, who are more new to the team, or never watched those 8 billion pound the rock commercials on NBA TV Canada, it was I believe it was a poem or a story that Dwane Casey read to the guys when he first came in. And I'm doing this off pure rote memory from Open Gym episodes and those commercials, as I mentioned, but I believe it was some guy, a story where they're pounding and chipping away at the rock, and you never know when it's going to break, and some people give up just as the rock's about to break, and every day you got to hammer away at it. And Dwane Casey literally brought in, I don't know where the boulder's from, but he brought in a giant rock. I want to say from northern Canada or Alaska or Greenland, some weird place, and it was in the locker room for his whole tenure with the team, which was it's a great meme. It's a great story. Dwane Casey, pound the rock for life. Anyways, I'm rambling on way too much. Dwane Casey, he wasn't the perfect all-around coach. He probably isn't the guy that we need in the locker room right now, but he was the guy that we needed when we got him. He was the guy that we needed to build this team, build us into the contender, and I know he'll have great success with Detroit. And anyways, let me know what you guys think of Dwane Casey down in the comment section below. He did so much for this team, and definitely tomorrow night when he makes his return, he deserves a huge round of applause. He deserves a video tribute. He deserves all of it. There should be no boos in the stadium. There should be no hate. Dwane Casey, shout out to that man. Great coach, great guy. Anyways, you're the best for listening this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Check out the videos on Courtside Connect, as that's getting launched, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Anyways, cheers.